Quick verdict. If your budget is under $200, then we can think of nothing better to buy outright. The extra cameras aren't up to much, but in terms of smooth operability and longevity, there's no holding this Moto G back. Listen full verdict and links available in the description if you want to buy this product. 4. Super price tag. You won't get a more balanced performer at this price. Battery life is impressive, well beyond last year's G7 model. Design that isn't a brick proves you needn't lack finesse when on a budget. Against. Ultra-wide camera results are soft, poor quality. Macro camera there for the sake of it. Lower screen resolution than other G series models. There are a lot of phones in the Moto G series. Like, a whole lot. So working out which budget performer is the one for you. In addition to this G8, there's also the G8 Plus, G8 Power, the G8 Power Lite, could be somewhat taxing. A lot of that decision, we suspect, comes down to price. And for under a couple of hundred of your local currency, it's this standard G8 that will prove highly attractive. Indeed, affordable phones don't come better than this. Design and display. Display, 6.4-inch IPS LCD, 720 by 1560 resolution, punch-hole camera. Dimensions, 161.3 by 75.8 by 9 mm, weight, 188 grams. Finishes, pearly white, neon blue. Fingerprint scanner to rear. 3.5 mm headphone jack. Motorola has slowly but surely been refining its handsets over the years, with the G8 ditching the excessive company branding and name splattering, with just the more subtle Batwing M logo on the rear, doubling up as the area where the fingerprint scanner lives. The Moto G8 is fairly chunky, though, on account of its significant battery capacity. There's a 4000 mAh cell driving everything behind the scenes, which is a full third more capacity than the outgoing G7 from last year. It's not quite as much as the G8 Power, which has a 5000 mAh battery, the clue there being in the name. The Power device is destined to be even longer lasting. As design has improved, screen bezels have been whittled down too. No, there's not the curved edge finesse of a flagship here, but gone are the days when you'd have to buy a brick with no finesse. The 6.4-inch panel might sound large, but it's perfectly manageable even with one-handed use. The teardrop screen notch of the G7 before it has been replaced by a punch hole for the front camera. While earlier Moto devices, such as the Moto One Vision, had massive punch-hole solutions, the G8's is overall neater. Although we think the earlier teardrop notch was actually the preferable solution. It's in the resolution department where the G8 holds back a little. That's a defining factor of this handset compared to those that cost a little more in the range. The resolution might be called HD+, but we're talking a stretched 720p panel, like when TVs came out years ago and were called HD ready. Fewer pixels in your face doesn't mean a bad experience by any means though. The G8 provides a bright enough and neutral color balance. It's less yellow than our OnePlus 8, as it happens. The G8 also includes some desirables that higher-end handsets tend to omit. There's a 3.5 mm jack for your headphones, for example, while the SIM slot is large enough for 2 cards, or use one for microSD storage expansion up to 256 GB, which you might need, given the 64 GB onboard memory found here. However, there's no NFC, near-field communication, so while there is Bluetooth for broadcasting to wireless headphones and the like, there's no way this phone can be used for payments using Google Pay. Performance and battery. Processor, Qualcomm Snapdragon 665, 4GB RAM. Software, Android 10 operating system, Moto app. Battery, 4000 mAh, USB-C charging, 10W. When dealing with budget phones you might not expect great performance, but actually we've found the G8 to stand in rather well as our day-to-day device. It's got the same chipset and RAM as per the G8 Power, thus our experience has been one and the same. No, it's not a flagship with the whizziest processor, but the Snapdragon 655 from Qualcomm is good enough for handling multiple apps and good enough for some gaming too. Don't overload it with dozens of apps, but we've been jostling between Gmail and South Park, Phone Destroyer without issue. When it comes to longevity, the G8 does a sterling job here too. It's a flip-the-coin consideration as to whether you buy this handset though, or spend an extra 50 notes buying the G8 Power, which has a 25% battery capacity boost, faster charging, and a higher resolution screen to boot. Whichever makes best sense for your needs. However, the G8's battery easily skirts through 24 hours of use with ease. We'd say the G8 Power probably delivers around a 20% longevity boost overall. But with the G8 running fully loaded, we've always been making it to bed with over 30% battery life remaining. Although we're certainly dealing with no flagship handset here, it's still a capable device. As we've leveled at other lower-end Motorola phones, however, the Wi-Fi connectivity is slow, so documents and apps can take longer to download. There's no NFC, as we've mentioned. And the 64GB storage on board is hardly huge. None of which are write-off problems by any means. In terms of software, the G8 Power comes with Google's Android 10 operating system. That means gesture control is the default, ensuring the small bezel screen can look its best without virtual keys in the way. These may take a little getting used to, but it works smoothly once you're up to speed. If you don't like it, however, the typical 3 softkey control mechanism is available too, and that's easy to activate when setting up the phone, or later down the line. Motorola is also on point when it comes to leaving software largely uninterrupted too. There is one app, called Moto, which handles a few additional controls though: actions, display, game time. That covers physical actions, such as karate chop for the torch to come on, the peak display to show notifications, and offering detailed DND controls during gaming sessions. All positive stuff. Cameras. Triple rear camera. Main, 16 megapixel, f1.7 aperture, 1.12 micrometers pixel size, phase detection autofocus, PDAF. Wide, 8MP, f2.2, 1.12 micrometers. Macro, 2MP, f2.2 Cephally camera, 8MP, f2.0. It's rare to find a phone with fewer than one rear camera these days. The Moto G8 is playing the same game, as it delivers a main 16 megapixel camera, alongside a wide-angle offering, and a third lens used for macro depth. First, the bad news: the ultra-wide sensor here isn't up to scratch. It performs poorly in general, failing to deliver sharp images, while its low-light abilities are also poor. It can be handy for the odd snap, but ultimately, we'd avoid using this lens. The macro lens is, as far as we can tell, only present to tick the triple camera box. Its results are poor. You have to activate the mode manually anyway, and, frankly, we'd forget about this existing. On the flip side to that, however, the main camera is pretty good, especially for a phone so affordable. There's ample sharpness and the camera app is, in good light response to use. However, there are fewer modes available overall, no fancy night capture mode here, for example, and there's some peculiar processing going on too. For low-light images, sometimes the results are all smeary, sometimes they show a lot more image noise. There are also peculiar pathays and blobs where the system thinks it's intelligently smoothing an area out, but is doing so ineffectively. The big takeaway from this camera setup is twofold. First, it's trying too hard. The ultra-wide and macro lenses are of limited use here. Second, the main camera is perfectly reasonable, and we'd prefer this to be the only lens on the rear if it meant more money saving, leaving the multi-camera offerings for the pricier handsets in the G series lineup. Verdict. Affordable phones used to mean all kinds of compromises, but the Moto G8 shows that you can now buy on a budget without giving up some of the finesse. Sure, don't expect the world from this device's camera setup, plus it lacks in some spec areas where its other G series models offer more. The G8 Power has more resolution and battery capacity, for example, but that's not to hold this device back. Far from it. In short, you won't find a better affordable phone than the Moto G8. It's one smooth operator for the money.